Welcome to the level set. I am hearing the phrase level set bantered abound more and more. We better make sure that we get this trademarked here very, very soon here and trademarked well. But we have a very special episode of the level set coming from the studio, the Fields and Associates studios in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah.
I have the brain trust together to run any Fortune 50 company in the world. To my left on the screen, we've got Jerry L.T., Christmas attorney at law and humanitarian. All the way in from an undisclosed location in Illinois is Dr. Charles Alexander, extraordinaire, and the one and only Mike Jones. And when I tell you that, this man is a scholar of all sorts, I am not being full enough. And so we are going to deal with several topics today to the extent that we can. But the question is, who chose him? Who chose him? And when we talk about who chose him, we are talking about the individual that occupies the Oval Office in your country's capital. And we want to plan on dealing with this situation from a political, economic, and a psychological standpoint, because Mental Health Month is every month on the level set. And with no further delay, I just want to ask the Mike Jones, as I get out of the way, who chose this clown?
Yeah, Larry, that to me is the existential question of the moment. Because if you take mainstream media and most of social media, everybody is focused on Trump. But Trump didn't parachute in from another planet. Uh, he actually got picked by the voters of America. People knew who he was, and for me, why that's such a profound question is, by any rational standard you use, Donald Trump is unfit to do anything. You wouldn't leave a puppy or a small child with him for 15 minutes. He literally cannot be trusted at any level, and he is not just intellectually incurious; he's actively ignorant. And
What do you mean? What by actively ignorant?
he works at not knowing stuff. Okay, I mean, there's some people who are ignorant by default.
They just don't know.
They just don't know. And then there are people who are actively ignorant. They
Don't want to know.
Yeah, they don't want to know, and fundamentally live their life actively being ignorant of the world of what's going on. And then
let me ask you this, Mike Jones. You are a politician at the highest level, and I would say a derivative Alan Locke. What does it take to be an effective president, and what should you know, and as a baseline, and where are we with him?
Well, here are the qualities I think you look for. You look for somebody that's rational, has some level of intellectual curiosity, so that they're interested in probing past the obvious. Another important quality is temperament. Okay, when you're in leadership, to be fairly emotionally well balanced and not respond, as Kipling says in the opening, you have to keep your head when all about you, but losing theirs and blaming it on you, but make allowance for their doubt too. That kind of temperament you need. And then you need the level of integrity. Okay, both personal integrity and professional integrity. And by integrity, I don't mean honest. I mean that people can trust who you are, even if you're not a good person. I can depend on you to be who you say you are or who you represent. So in America, we confuse brand with reputation. And the brand is who you want people to believe you are. Your reputation is who people believe or know you to be based on your lived experience and their perception of you and your lived experience. So your reputation goes before you, and people can depend on their reputation. And that's why you'll hear people say, well, if that's what the brother said, that's what it is. And when all you got is a brand, somebody will say, well, you're lying, you never tell the truth. But even always lying is part of your reputation. So that's who Trump is. So you can't be shocked about any of this. So I think those are the qualities. And you got to be pretty damn lucky while you be a president. I mean, there are things that happen that you have no control over, things that you can impact and things that you can't. And you got to get some shooters bounces on occasion. And then you've got to work at it every day. That's the other thing. Trump is lazy. I mean, it fundamentally does not work at anything. So, but what he does have is, like all grifters economy, he knows what P.T. Barnum said is true. A sucker is born every minute, and this is a country of 300 million of them. Okay, so, and he understands that. And that's how he plays. And the fact that people are shocked, it reminds me of Claude Rains, Captain Manoa in Casablanca. I'm shocked that Trump's lying again. Okay, so, but to me though, it goes to the question of culture and psychological profile or health of the American public, because rational people who have a reasonable handle on the world would never consciously pick him. And they fall into two groups. There's the cult folks who just believe everything, and that's crazy. And then it's what I call the stupid rich white folks who think they're smarter than everybody, and they think somebody like Trump is controllable. And Trump is not controllable because he has no integrity and no moral center of gravity. So you cannot depend on him ever to do the right thing, even if his life depends on it.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Jones, and I'm going to use your microphone here. Just stay there. Earlier this week, Stacey Abrams identified on one of these talk shows 10 traits that suggest or are telling to a democracy that identify autocracies. What are your thoughts about that? Because when we spoke about that, I thought you had just an incredible insight into where we are and what the deal is right now.
Yeah, there. What I was doing was looking up what I said.
I could do that here.
So that's the problem. Quote with being a jazz musician, you can't ask somebody to play when they played last night. I know the song you're talking about. But
You know what? I don't even want the edition from last night. I want the new one.
well, what I said, the point of my comment to when you text us that is I take exception with her predicate, and it's a fallacy that Black political public leadership falls into. We make the assumptions about America that white people make about America, or maybe immigrants of color. Our experience with America is totally different than everybody else. So when I think it's ludicrous for Black people to talk about our democracy, because in their democracy, we were enslaved, we were discriminated against them, and that didn't happen in the autocratic government. That happened in American democracy.
Exactly.
And to show you how complicit American democracy is, the classic example for me is the Fugitive Slave Act. Okay, now let's talk about that for just a minute. The Fugitive Slave Act was the law of the land. And so that if you were an enslaved person in Mississippi, Alabama, any of those places, and you escaped, the law was people in free states that didn't have slavery were legally required to remand you back to the people that enslaved you. Now that was passed by a Democratic United States Congress. So that makes literally everybody white in America at that time complicit with maintaining slavery in America. And whether they get that or not, and there's an argument that they should understand that, but I don't have much expectation of that. But if you're Black, you're a complete idiot talking about us and them. As a matter of fact, it's the equivalent of Samuel L. Jackson, Django. Okay, it literally rests on the same premise that your reality is Leonardo DiCaprio's character reality. So you're talking about what's he doing on a horse?
On that nag.
Yeah,
What's that boy doing on that nag?
Yeah,
Right.
and you gonna let him sleep in the house. So
In the big house, we're gonna have to burn all them sheets.
right. But the point is, her even being on here on program talking about the problems of American democracy, there may be some problems with American democracy, but American democracy has never been favorable to us. So let's start from that premise. Say
Us sick though, boss.
Huh?
Us sick, boss.
Us ACC. You have a problem with American democracy. I have a problem with America. Okay, no matter what government formation you happen to be using. So to me, it's our inability to separate our reality from their reality that I think undermines our efforts at progress. As I have gotten older, I've just gotten more acquainted with Frederick Douglass or older thinkers who, and since this is July, 4th of July was last week, when you think about what Stacey Abrams said, and then you think about Frederick Douglass's speech on what is the slave, what is the 4th of July to the slave. That's what I'm talking about. Frederick Douglass could separate himself from America and have a critique of America And he had a critique of American Christians as a result of what they say Christianity is supposed to be and what they do. So, and if you ask Frederick Douglass when he gave the speech about the commemoration of the Lincoln Monument after the Civil War, Frederick Douglass said, let's get one thing straight. He wasn't our president, he was president. And now we had issues. But basically what he said, as a white president goes in these times, he was pretty good. But but he qualified it to put Lincoln in the context of what it meant to be Black in America. And we talk about Lincoln like we were white. And so, and you should transfer this question to Charles, because that's a psychological problem and some form of mental.
It is a psychological problem. 100%. 100%. I want to keep your mic on. Let's try and all use Dr. Jones's mic.
That's fine. That's fine.
But so we're gonna have to raise our voices a little bit. Kwame, we're gonna come over to you. Kwame is also Jerry A.L.T. Christmas, aka Kwame. We're gonna stop calling him.
Kwame
Jerry.
born on Saturday.
Kwame on
Born on Saturday.
But he was born on a Saturday.
Kwame,
That's what
it
Kwame
means.
is.
He was born on Saturday.
That's what it means.
Born
That's
on
why I'm
Saturday.
Kwame. I was born on Saturday.
Yes, sir.
You know what day you were born on?
Do I know what that? I do not. I'm going to go back and find out.
You got to go back and look it up. And I'm cold feet.
I'm
You're
Kwame
Kofi.
too.
You
Oh,
Kwame
wow.
too? Okay, good.
Wow.
I was born on a Friday.
Wow. Payday. Give me my money.
Run me my money.
Run me my money. Yeah. Well, good. Well, let's break ranks real quick, and Dr. Alexander opine on that if you could, and Kwame, you get in there when you get an opportunity. But yeah, what the psychological impact of us continuing to act as if this thing is of ours? How did we get here? Because this is diabolical. Because when you start to look at curing the problems of America, you don't even identify the problems that you have.
And right before you go into that, just let me add this. What he said is what all our leadership does. All our Black leadership does. None of our Black leadership separates our situation from the American situation. Now, if you hear any of Black leadership talking, especially elected Black leadership at the national level, they're going to tell you the American people want this. The American people, all these people coming that we put in office from the Black caucus coming straight out of Black districts, or always say the American people. They ain't gonna never say this is the situation for Black people, or this was the situation for slaves like Frederick Douglass did. And I think that is a major issue now, is that we don't have anybody speaking about our behalf, and they're in leadership positions.
You know, I read Tom Burrell's book, Brainwash, this summer. It's one of those books you couldn't put down. Mm-hmm. And it is terrorizing what we've gone through in terms of what we have been inculcated with and, laid down. But Dr. Alexander, we really would love to hear your response.
It's easy. It's trauma. It's historical trauma. But, we don't have to go far. Malcolm said it. What's the matter, boss? We sick. And so we're not far from that. We are that. And so part of our issue though is that we want it both ways. So just like we were talking about in the pre-production or what have you. So on the one hand, we don't want to accept that we're second-class citizens. On the other hand, we get mad when people don't vote with us. Well, it ain't both. So either you're a second-class citizen or you're not, and we are, right? So
in the strata of this place.
Yes, we're
Mhm.
second class citizens. And so even with that,
So just say, but that should never define who you are
that
to
should
yourself.
define that, right.
To
Ever.
yourself.
That's
That's
the
right.
political reality.
That's a descriptive.
That's all that is a political reality.
That's a political
and,
reality.
and that
Exactly.
and that should dictate how you move.
Right.
And you should move
Right.
like a lead singer at all times,
That
a
you know,
headliner
so-
at all times.
So you should move like so that should suggest to you that this ain't a we.
Right,
This is a us and them.
right.
Because if it was a we wouldn't be second class citizens. So we struggle with that first and foremost. And because we struggle with that, it's difficult for us to have internal consistency, and then it's difficult for us to have strategic alliances because we don't know how to pick friends. And so, as an example, why would Black folks not like Russia?
Because we've been
We've been
brainwashed
brainwashed.
into not liking
There's
Russia.
no reason for Black
None
folks
whatsoever.
not
The,
to like
the
Russia.
original
But part of it
Bible
is not knowing the history.
And
And that's the big part of it. We have been severely undermined in understanding and knowing the history of slavery worldwide.
colonization.
And
and
Russia
colonization.
never colonized anybody.
And not only did
Wait.
they not colonize, they funded revolution. They funded anti-colonial movements all over the place. Now, so folks will be like, well, no, they're not a colonial power, at least not to persons of color. Okay, so even when we started to have this conversation, I was debating with somebody a week or so, a couple months ago, whatever. Like, well, he's going to go into Poland. First of all, I don't know that he said that. I think there's some issues with the question that was framed, or how the question was framed. But at the end of the day, Poland is a part of NATO. All of them people are his enemies. And so he's saying, before you come for me, I'm gonna get you. And so we struggle with that. But we as Black folks, we should be processing this thing like, okay, why did the United States assassinate Maurice Bishop? Right? Because Maurice Bishop, Patrice Lumumba, why did they overthrow Kwame Nkrumah?
Give him a brief description of both of those gentlemen.
So Maurice Bishop was the political leader, the president. I don't know if he called him, if that was his designation, but that's what he served of Grenada. Similarly, Patrice Lumumba was that, and in the Congo.
Kwame Nkrumah.
Kwame Nkrumah, that and Ghana. But all of these places, they were, socialist governments, but they all sought to be aligned, as did Chairman Mao. Ho Chi Minh. No. In Vietnam.
Well, Ho Chi Minh was Vietnam. Mao Zedong was in China.
Vietnam. Chairman Ho, they all came to the United States and asked, can we do something together? In the Haitian Revolution, they came to the United States and asked, can we count on the United States? The United States said no. In the case, of course, they say no to the Haitian Revolution because the United States government and commerce is predicated on slavery, so they can't, so they say no, right? But we see this all over, So it starts. First time we see this with the Haitian Revolution, then we see it in all these other places, but based on what the United States says it does, you have these other freedom fighters thinking that they can come to the United States to get assistance in seeking freedom. And you can't.
So I was just going to say, because they're familiar with the United States brand versus the United States reputation.
Come on now.
Yep.
Because
Come on now.
if you were familiar with the United States' reputation, you wouldn't have bothered to make the trip.
You wouldn't have asked that question, right?
You wouldn't have asked the question.
And so, like, you know, so like with Chairman Hope, he's quoting like the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, it's literally, my major was Asian history and undergrad.
Learn something new every day, though.
Yeah. The very
I would have never thought that.
use the Declaration of Independence as the template for their Declaration of Independence from
Right.
the French. And I would say that's also something that we need to be cognizant of and make a distinction. That white Americans don't own what Jefferson said. Jefferson doesn't even own what he said. So that the truth and the reality of a statement is not necessarily dependent on who uttered it. Okay, that the construct of the words and the value system that the words articulate or stand on their own merit.
Michael Martin Luther King Jr. told him, you ought to do what you said you was going to do on paper.
Right.
And that still stands true today.
But
And
and
when
the
did he
words
say
and the
that?
words
Hey,
have
I'm sorry?
When did he say that?
Oh, it escapes me when he said that.
He
Doc.
probably said that before he said, "I have a drink."
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's the part
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the speech
Yeah.
that nobody
Yeah.
talks about. You know,
Yeah.
so when people first the speech ain't called. That's not the
That's
title.
not-
of the speech.
no.
By the way. And so,
You know, it's only for Mahalia hollering out to him.
That's it.
That was a riff.
That was a riff.
well,
She had
it's
hollered it
but it's
out.
a riff because he had done it 3 times before.
Exactly.
And so that wasn't something he prepared for that. That was something that, you know, that he had in his pocket. He was familiar with it. And so he put it out there. But that point is that, you know, when is the United States going to do what it said it does? Not what we're asking you to do.
I'm not
What-
asking you to do anything.
Why won't you just do what you
What you
said?
said you were gonna do.
You was gonna do, right?
Like,
And so,
like those young girls say, "Oh, gee, you gonna do what you said you was gonna do?"
And so, you know, Maurice Bishop, he came to the United States. He says, you know, I want to do this, that, or the other. The United States says no. So he then gets assistance from Castro. And so now, you know, he's literally bringing Russia to the United States back door. So they kill him, right? And so Patrice Lumumba said, I want to do this, that, or the other with the United States. The United States said no. So he talked to Russia. They killed him. You know, he and Kwame Nkrumah were already linked in a line. So of course, once they got rid of him, you know, the next piece was to get rid of Kwame Nkrumah, because Kwame Nkrumah was talking about, you know, kind of like a united African front, right? And so can't have that, and so they ain't kill him, but you know they overthrow him, and so
Gaddafi, what you talking about? A United America?
Gaddafi.
Well,
I mean, United Africa. You talking about United Africa?
And the gold
Gaddafi
back
was
son.
Gaddafi was a bad African.
And so this
Yeah, he was
black
bad
guy,
African.
the
And
black guy who was the president,
They used him to kill him.
had him killed, right?
And then did what? Destabilize the government.
And so now you have the slave trade.
And then one point when you
And-
talk
and
about the
Libya.
slave trade and you talk about the Fugitive Slave Act, let's not forget the exceptions in the 13th Amendment that allows for slavery, which is why all our people are in prison right now.
Right.
And it's a result of that. Not only is it a result of that, you know, when you go back, it's a result of Clinton and Biden and the way they pushed that crime bill through. And the effects of that are still hurting us now and will continue to hurt us unless that's repealed. Unless that's repealed, we will continue to have multiple segments of our community in prison.
And so to that point, Gerald, and this gets back to, you know, so the initial question. So I couched it in terms of Malcolm. So, but I couched it in terms of, you know, Black psychology is even more basic and fundamental. We've talked about it before. It's psychological disorientation. And so you don't have an African-centered point of reference.
Right.
Come on now.
So
you're gonna bring up Amos Wilson this morning too.
So your point of reference is other instead of us. And so you can't get to wherever you're going if
You don't
your
have
your standard of measure is the enemy.
And then
And
also,
so you can't get to where you're going. And so
Dr. Alexander, I think too, mentally, we don't, and we had this conversation, Larry, we don't realize how colonized we are until you get out the country. You know, look, many people have been out the country, but I think even for me, and I consider myself to be enlightened, but you know, even being in out the country this past couple of weeks, you know, you start to realize, hell, I'm as colonized as a lot of these white people. Because I get over here and I gotta have stuff a certain way, you know, and it gotta be done a certain way. Because I'm bringing the same mentality over to Costa Rica that I have.
So you're not. So the crime is colonization.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You're not a criminal because you've been colonized, unless you don't realize that you've been colonized. And so you realize that you've been colonized. So that's the problem. So our issue is we don't realize that we're colonized.
Right.
So it's not that we're colonized. That's just a point of fact, right? That's why we're here. And so, but if you don't realize that you're colonized, now you're complicit, and
you're pushing the mindset on it.
You're pushing that agenda.
Right. So let's go to the 13. Just like we need to be correct in terms of like, so I'm not. We've had this. I don't really. I'm not a fan of Juneteenth. It's a state celebration.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't no federal celebration. That's a state celebration for many, many reasons. Fundamentally, it's a state celebration because first and foremost, it's predicated on, you know, whatever folks think was supposed to happen with the Emancipation Proclamation, which don't free nobody.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, that's where we got to start, right?
Right.
It don't free nobody.
Right.
You can't free the enslaved in another country, which is what the Confederacy was. It was another country predicated on white supremacy per their document.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's another thing, like white supremacy. That ain't a black revolutionary term. That's a white people term. That's what's in. It's in the speech. It's in the cornerstone speech that the Confederacy is founded upon the principle it's going to be the first nation built and established on the principle of white supremacy. And that's in the speech. That's in the cornerstone.
That gets us back to the beginning of the conversation with Mike, because that's why Trump is in office.
Yes, so that's where we're going with this. Is that, and so that's how he gets. And so it's just like so when we were having the conversation, and Mike is saying what he was saying, is like we live in the Confederacy. There are no border states. There are no free states. This whole thing is the Confederacy. And in the Confederacy, they were only able to go to war because you had a bunch of dumb people fighting for slavery who couldn't get a job because slavery existed. And so ain't nobody about to hire you, poor white man.
With no skills.
When I got free labor. Right? And so this is what we got, right? And so then under that whole rubric, like now, and you were speaking to this, Attorney Christmas, is that our leadership, and they're only our leadership because they look like us. They're not our leadership.
Right.
They so the people who look like us that are in leadership positions, they've internalized all of this, right? And so, but so just like we got to be right-minded about the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth, we also got to be right-minded about the 13th Amendment. They didn't. Two things. We got to quit saying that white folks got to conspire to do anything to us. They really kind of blatant about what, so they ain't sneaking shit. They just do what they do, right? So they didn't slide the 13th Amendment in there. That's what they do. Now, but the reason I say they didn't slide it because the 13th Amendment is part, the foundation or the fundamentals of the 13th Amendment are why we got a United States and why we got an Australia. This is what the white people do with criminals. So Australia was a prison colony, and the United States, they sent the people that they didn't want in Britain here.
I tell you, there's no English or European nobility found in America. Everybody that had it going on in Europe stayed.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Everybody that came here was on their ass,
Yes.
or else
They needed to get out of town.
And then they made up this story about them fleeing whatever, but
let's just take the Puritans. The Puritans were religious bigots, and the English, basically, Church of England, wasn't going to let them run amok in England and say, basically, hit the road, Jack, so they could come to Massachusetts and be religious bigots. But fundamentally, the religiosity of America is unique on the planet, at least in the Western world. I mean, literally, religion in Europe is a philosophical issue, not a cultural issue. It deals with the more cerebral aspects of life. In America,
It's a practitioner's
sport, yeah, and it reminds you of the superstitions of underdeveloped countries and stuff. But what I wanted to say is, going back to Charles's point about us, the psychological misorientation, even the question of asking America, when are you going to do, or why don't you do what you say? It's an irrelevant question. If you're Black, you could embrace the words in the Declaration of Independence because they are objectively, and from your standpoint, empirically true. Whether nobody in America believes that or not, it does not stop it from being true, and it does not stop you from embracing that idea. And my assertion in this country is based on my belief in that idea, regardless of who had it first. Because it's like everything in the universe, it don't belong to who had it first. It's now in the universe. It's in the ether. So if all men, and by extension women, are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, then I'm gonna, we'll be in a philosophy class for a minute. I'm gonna say that's an a priori statement. And that means it's true before the fact. It's true because it's true. And if that's the predicate that you operated from, that means you have no right to do this to me. And I reject your assertion that you do. And I don't have to ask you to do shit. Okay? I'm asserting my humanity on this situation. And I don't need you to agree with the statement. I think the statement has merit. I think it's, again, existential, a priori true. Even if Jefferson didn't mean it for me when he said it. But to his, I'll give him some credit, and he wrestled with the issue of slavery. Not that he was going to give it up because it made his life comfortable, and that's why he could read all the books and wrote what he wrote because he didn't have a job. Mm-hmm. But he wrestled with the inconsistency between that idea and his life. Okay, so I give him credit not for being good, but at least being intellectually cognizant of the contradictions that he was living, which means why he could say and wrote, this ain't gonna last because it can't last. And basically he's saying, if the first thing is true, the second thing can't be true. So we even reason from the wrong position, even on this argument. So if I were going to make an argument to white America while I was in someplace, the only thing a black senator or congressman should start with is the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. Because the Declaration of Independence is the vision statement of America. The Constitution is the mission statement, how you go get it done. But what I would say is that I'm going to assert this predicate. And that means, by definition, everything you've done and are doing is illegitimate. It has no moral or ethical standing, no place in the universe. So if you want to know who is the outlaw country, the criminal country, ruled by a criminal class, it's America. It's America. Mm-hmm. Based on the statement, all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And if that's true, if you believe that to be true, then you can reject out of hand, damn near everything that happens in this country. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to ask them to try to live up to that standard. You say, because I'm going to live up to the standard. And you can do what you damn well please. And I'll do to you what I can, if that's what you do. So we're starting from the wrong place. So when you start wrong, it's hard to get it right later on. You know, we all basketball junkies here. Yeah, we can come back from being down 20, but why get down 20 to have to come back? Because sometimes
you ain't gonna be able to come back.
Because sometimes you don't make it.
You run out of clock.
Right.
You run out of clock.
Yeah, you run out of clock, right. Or you run out of gas before you run out of clock. Okay? Yeah,
or they take you out the game.
Yeah. Wait a minute, it took so much to catch up, you ain't got enough left to win. So
but that's an important point then. Yeah. How do we turn it around?
Well, you got to think about it.
We're at this critical state right now.
Because again, we got a level set.
Yeah, we got a level set.
So part of that, again, is acknowledging what he's saying. And like this is the is. This, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the state of things for us, and we struggle with embracing that this is the state of things, and it's a different. And I can imagine.
Do we struggle, or we just refusing to accept it? Because
I think
struggle,
it's a
struggle
little
means
bit of
that you
both.
struggle means you trying to
I think
accept it,
it's
and
a
you
little
have
bit
a
of both.
hard time with it.
I think it's a little bit of both. Great
Okay.
question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think we clearly have people in denial,
Clearly, in
right?
denial.
And then we clearly have just, the ignorant, like they just literally don't know. And then we have the folks who are all in, trying to do this thing different than what we've been doing. But in order to do it again, we gotta, so like real quick, like that slave clause is a legislative entity in the United States government almost 100 years before we're emancipated. That slave clause enters the United States government nomenclature because of the Northwest Territory. And so it's in the Northwest Territory that slavery is prohibited except for the federal. That's where the clause comes from. And
because we don't pay anybody in jail. Historically, we never paid anybody who was locked up, who had to work. So that was, in theory, that literally applies to anybody who's in prison, except where they make exceptions. And we make some exceptions now. But historically, you didn't make an exception. To your point, Gerald, part of why we struggle is because Americans are so poorly educated. I mean,
in the next statement, that includes us, right?
Right. I mean, so
because we think it's just us.
Yeah,
we
but
think
it ain't us. Everybody in America.
Everybody.
Americans are the most intellectually uncurious people on the planet, and also the most actively ignorant of the developed world. So I'm not talking about countries where they don't have education systems and stuff like that. Huh? Yeah. So here, and if you were in a literature class and you say, wow, and I'm going to have you read The Count of Monte Cristo.
Huge book.
Huh?
How many pages is it? That's about 1,000 pages.
Yeah, it's a big book, but great story.
Great story.
Yeah, a great story. So what that story is really about is about revenge, justice, ultimately him liberating himself and overcoming his imprisonment. But it's a story about a man who was on Devil's Island or whatever island he was on, who was in prison 40 years and never accepted, even though he was physically made retained. He never accepted his imprisonment and was every day was thinking about how to get out. So the point is, you could learn that lesson in a literature class. Okay? It ain't got nothing to do with reading the Revolutionary. It's just a good English teacher teaching you about what this story is about. I'll stay in that genre, the same author, The Three Musketeers. It's fundamentally a story about friendship and loyalty.
And why else is it important? Why else are those two? Are those two?
Right, yeah, right.
Are those two?
Yeah, and so when you're teaching, you use all of these because the things I need. Yeah, I can have you read some philosophy about all of that, but you ain't interested in that. But D'Artagnan and Aramis and Porthos, and literally, society, community is based on the statement that is regularly made in The Three Musketeers: all for one and one for all.
Great movie.
Huh? that is fundamentally the essence of community.
And both of those novels are written by Alexander Dumas,
That's right.
Dumas,
who's a black man.
who's it?
Whose father was a hero of the Haitian Revolution
And-
and ended up being a hero in France, a famous general that Napoleon didn't like because he was as famous as Napoleon.
And so, and that's another space where, like, yes, we want to make sure that we are represented and we show up in whatever's being taught. But this thought that it's okay for us to check out because whatever it is we learning ain't objectively black on the space, that's stupid. So I just ain't gonna learn because I don't see me in a thing. That's not sustainable, right? But that's not just us. And so the thing is, we think that that's just us. Nobody's learning to Mike's point, but that ain't happenstance. That's what this thing is predicated on. That's how you maintain control. You maintain control by undereducating and miseducating the people. That's baked in. And so the United States is intentionally done. We're just seeing it in its most obvious form right now. And so, but because we don't, so like regardless of what's put in front of us, too many of us don't engage in independent study in any meaningful way, then you can't counter the narrative. And you just start making up stuff.
I'm gonna say what, and let's just say what I said about the Count of Monte Cristo and the Three Musketeers. Somebody thinks it's wrong, so I disagree with that.
Mhm.
Then we got to have a debate, an argument about my idea or my interpretation versus your interpretation. The class is this, so everybody is now learning how to critically think,
Critical thinking.
and make a critical argument supported by some reason and so all of that's process. So now that you know how to do that, whether I'm right about Alexander Dumas or not, you now have a skill set that you can apply any place else in the world. You know how to, what is it? It was Lyndon Johnson's favorite, because he was a master politician. It was his favorite biblical quote. I think it's Isaiah. He said, "Come, let us reason together." That's fundamentally all you're talking about.
Mhm.
Learning how to reason. For a teacher to ask you, well, why do you think that? And I then move you away from belief, because belief is not empirically verified, but you're entitled to. You can believe what you believe. I can believe what I believe. I want to know how you know that, and to know something exceed is a belief that has an empirical basis. A belief that has no empirical basis is just an opinion. So when we talk about us in America, and we do a pretty decent job of that here, especially Charles, in documenting, that's a scholar, and you do it, and Larry does it, the lawyer, it documenting why I can say this. And at that point, it elevates you past your ignorant enemy who can't reason past whatever his uninformed or her uninformed opinion is. So, but that used to happen, I would say, regularly for Black kids, and when we were in all Black environments with Black adults, getting you ready for whatever you were going to face. I think we need to have an internal debate, because we have internal debates all the time. But we talk about stuff that white folks don't talk about. We always have, we always will. But the real dilemma now for a lot of parents is you got to decide how to educate your child. Okay, I mean, and that's a big deal. I mean, you got to decide at what cost, how much cultural reality do you have to give up in order to ensure that they can successfully be educated. I can say that's something my parents, and I'm going to argue your parents, didn't have to do. They didn't have to figure out how unblack are my kids going to be in order to be successfully graduate from high school and go on to some kind of career or education. And now parents with means are confronted with that all the time. Parents without means, their stuff stays all black, and it almost works. And for the other parent with the means, they're able to effectively educate a child, but at what it costs. And I'm not just talking about the dollar cost. I'm talking about the emotional, psychological cost. And who's the child you get at the end of that process?
I think that's the thing. The child you get at the end of that process.
That's what I
think that's what we're dealing with now.
Yeah,
is the child you get at the end of that process.
When I say cost, that's what I'm talking about. The child you get at the end of that process.
And also, too, you know, what I realized with my children, because, you know, we sent them to a variety of different places, you know, trying a lot of different things. If I could do it all over again, I was just homeschooling. I would. But finding out some of the situations that they were placed in during that time period that they weren't mature enough to recognize what they are now really troubles me, because I found out so many things that happened to my children in these white environments that I had no clue what's going on. But they're old enough now to tell me.
They can articulate
They can articulate it. And, you know, in one example where, you know, my child was made to sit outside the classroom off and on a regular basis. I never knew that. And I'm like livid now. I'm like, I can't believe they had you sitting out in the hallway. And I'm paying these
like
people.
Sweat.
You know what I mean? I'm paying these people.
Like Sweat and the University of Oklahoma.
You know,
they wouldn't let him in the classroom, had him sitting out. He had to learn from outside.
You know, and I think about it now, and you know, it pisses me off, and it's like, I wish I'd have never had you there. And I blame myself for it.
Well, you can't do that. W.E. Du Bois said that we were wrong for using these kids. I think that's correct, for using these kids as battering rams. I believe that was W.E. Du Bois that stated that. But that you cannot fault the well-intentionedness of our elders. They had no idea that this would occur.
But even with that, I think that's another good place in terms of we gotta set the records straight. So, so this thought that we arbitrarily and without good, like there was no reasoning in that informed we're gonna use our children, blah 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 blah. Okay, like that integrating schools was not a thought out plan. Now, in its execution, we ultimately figured, well, first of all, it didn't work the way that the courts or whoever thought of it. No, it didn't work like that. I mean, because there was no immediate integration.
Well, it was just desegregation.
And so that's the one thing. But the other part of that is, again, we live in this mythological parallel universe that says that all of our all-Black institutions were well-established, well-funded, and well-functioning. And that's not true. Because if it were true, we wouldn't have been trying to get to where they were. So we be making up stuff. So like this whole thing, that life got worse for us because of integration. All right, so let's even say that that's true. Nigga, ain't nobody tell you to stop shopping right there. You that was a willful decision. If because of integration, you decided to stop going to Mr. Jones's shop and you started to go to Schnucks, that was your decision. That wasn't integration. That was your decision. If you decided to move from wherever you lived to where white folks was, for whatever your reasons was, that wasn't integration. Nobody integration didn't dictate that we leave and do anything different.
Here is, I wrote a piece a long time ago. Matter of fact, I wrote it with 5 pieces that I made into one piece, and American ran it in a supplement. And one of the things that I said is we don't understand our historical context.
We don't.
See, everybody but us who's come to America has come as an individual. They make individual decisions to leave where they at and come here.
Exactly.
Even if you're an immigrant of color, even if you think you being treated badly, you made a value judgment that I'm better off in the long run, or my kids will be here than if I had stayed there. That's not how we got here.
Right.
We got collected all at one time, dumped here, and we didn't even know each other. We got thrown together.
That's the point.
Yeah,
we didn't even know each other.
So our Black community was a function of overt white oppression. Now, we created community out of that. We created a culture, we bonded it, but the reality, what always held us together was overt white oppression. And we never had freedom of choice. Every choice that somebody Black made, particularly as, first of all, you knew you had to take in being Black in consideration. But if you're my age or your father-in-law or Grover's age, I can tell you everything you did if you were starting to be successful making a move. You were thinking about 2 things: what I got to do and what it means for us. That I can't mess this up, not because of me. I can't mess it up because can't nobody, if I blow it, can't nobody behind me have this opportunity. So,
and then that's something that I want you to speak on, because that's a whole lot of pressure. That's a whole lot of pressure.
But the point is, Gerald, I'm gonna say no, it wasn't. It was just the norm.
Yes, it is.
It was the norm, but it still was a lot of pressure.
But here's what happened. You're right. It's a lot of pressure. So once the society got desegregated, because it never got integrated, and Black people, for the first time in 200 years, or for almost 400 years, had something that everybody else has always had in America. They got the right to make individual choices. So all of a sudden, you could choose something, and you didn't have to think about nobody but yourself if you wanted to do it. If you wanted to live here, shop there.
Right.
So we talking about fairly mundane shit. I ain't talking about metaphysical stuff.
Right.
I'm talking about just basic
going
stuff.
to the movies.
So we did what everybody else did. We made individual choices. And one of the things for me that we miss, that I wrote in this piece, that we keep referencing back to our community. Well, our community was a result of overt white oppression. You remove the overt oppression and nothing holds us together. Not religion, not language, not country of origin. So every other immigrant population here, this is except for our indigenous brothers, this is a country of people who came from someplace else. But everybody's got a point of origin.
Origin story.
And I'll even tell you what makes us the only people that ever refer to Africa or uninformed white folks and Black folks. if you talk to anybody from the continent, they'll tell you what country
What
they're
country,
from, or
right.
what tribe they're from.
I was about to
Exactly.
say
Yeah,
that.
so even our understanding of the world and our frame of reference has all been
We're not
shaped.
from Benin.
Huh?
We're not from
Right.
Benin.
Yeah.
We from Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not from Ghana.
We're not from Ghana.
We're not from Kenya.
Africa is the only
Hey,
place
it's the
we
boy
can
from
be
Africa.
from.
And we so far, and the other thing too, Mike, about that whole Africa thing is that, you know, in both times that I've been to Africa, and you know, as you go and you travel, you realize how far away that Africa is,
Right.
and how far away they brought us. Because you get on that plane, you know, like I go with Costa Rica, that's a 3-hour flight. We go to Jamaica, that's a 2-hour flight, hour and a half. But when you get ready to go to Africa, you go on the plane for 15 hours. You know, and that's on the plane for 15 hours. You know, we ain't even talking about what it was like on a boat. But we talking about on a plane in today's world, it's a 15-hour flight. And that's a lot. That is a lot. You know, you don't just get up and get on a plane for 15 hours. You know,
Therein lies
the
origin
or
the misorientation.
Disorientation and the problem. Because even if you wanted to expose people more to the countries in Africa and their, you know, naturally where they came from, it is very difficult and expensive to do.
Here, I'll even make this statement because I've made it before. The only Americans who are original to this country are us.
Right.
Because everybody else came here from someplace else and they brought someplace else with them. Who we are today is a function. Literally, there's some liminal parts of who we are that come from the continent. But who we are function of those 400,000 or so people that came to North America, who got stripped of their memory, their culture, everything that they knew before got erased, and it was by the third generation had to be totally eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, we are creatures of this place.
We created culture.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
all of it. We're from scratch.
And also, so the other implication of that, and so, you know,
And that's
so
the
we
point,
always
my point. And that's stay on that, because that has implications.
Yes.
Who we are and who we are not matters.
It matters
when you start to talk about stuff like this.
And it matters how we frame it.
Right.
Because the fact of the matter is, we're not all one.
Right.
Because we come from wherever we come from. Our DNA is older than all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are wherever your ancestors were taken from, that's fundamentally who you are. So like many of us think, so let's take rice, for example, right? I love rice. Okay. Many of us think we eat rice because of West Forest. Because you got good,
because of the Asians.
Yeah,
right.
Because you go over West Forest and you get some good fried rice.
Olive Street.
You like the spot over the spot over there in your city, right?
Yeah, I'm allowed.
Right.
A couple of spots
Right.
in there.
Yeah. And so
I have to go back to Clarence and Natural Brick.
But the reason that there's rice in the United States is us.
Right. We snuck it into our hair.
We brought rice here, and once they realized that we brought rice here, they went and got more of us from where we were cultivating rice,
right,
to start to cultivate rice here. Mm-hmm. And so as a result of us, the United States is in the top 10 in the world in the production of rice. But we don't think
South
that.
Carolina was the wealthiest colony of the 13.
Predicated on rice production.
Because of rice.
And tobacco.
But really rice.
And so
and if you go to Africa, you're gonna eat a lot of rice.
You're gonna eat a lot of rice. And so 15 of the top 30 to 40
Jamaica, you gonna buy some peas.
rice producing countries are in Africa.
Right.
And of that 15, probably half of them, would be
And I'll tell you
considered
why.
along the West
Wait,
Coast.
now,
It's
and
nuts.
I'll tell you why they're on the West Coast. About 1200 AD, the Chinese built these huge fleets. The Chinese are a very insular society. And if you really want to know about the real ethnocentric people on the planet, they're the Chinese. Chinese don't think much of nobody. White folks, nobody else. And China literally translates as the Middle Kingdom, which means for them, they're the center of the universe. But they've had a dynasty, I don't remember which one it was, but the emperor, but they got interested in the world and they built these humongous ships that size of aircraft carriers, really, I mean. And so the first people to sail around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa are not Europeans going to Asia, it's the Chinese coming west. Now they was familiar with Africa, East Coast Africa, because throughout the Middle Age, from 700-800s on, the world is connected. We think that, America's over here, but the world has always been. So people in China knew about Eastern Africa, Africans knew about the Chinese, everybody knew about India, because the way you got to China was over the top, over the Silk Road, which is going over the top of India. So it was Europeans that didn't know a lot about shit. Okay, but the rest of stuff. Yeah, but the rest of the world was kind of connected. But the Chinese literally got all the way up the coast of Africa and probably got into the Mediterranean Sea. Were not overly impressed with nothing. They traded, they left some stuff. The fleet got called back because the emperor died, and the folks that took over didn't like the idea of China being open and global, so they called the fleet back and burned it, and never left China again. And and here's how profound the act that was, the burning of that fleet and destroying it. Dao Zedong, who literally is the father, Mao is the ancestor of the People's Republic. But Dao Zedong was the cat that modernized China after he said, we'll never make that mistake again. Because it did, it cut China off. China was the most, if you had to pick the most dominant power on the planet for the history of the world, it would be Chinese.
And they have not forgotten that.
And they have never forgotten that.
They have not forgotten
they
that.
have-
And because if you look at the way they handle the United States, they handle them, the United States, as if they're dealing with a petulant child.
Right.
They really do. They let you go through all your tantrums. They let you can have a tantrum in the middle of the floor, and they give you space, and they laugh at you, and they exploit.
But here's what the Chinese told the British about Hong Kong. When they told the British, you got to leave Hong Kong. Okay, you can't have no colony in China. And the British said, the ambassador said, we'll never leave Hong Kong. We'll stay here if it takes 50 years. And the Chinese said, well, if all you want is 50 years, that ain't nothing. Okay. We'll see you in 50 years. And really, here's how they did the deal. Tell you what, we'll do the deal today. We'll agree that you're leaving in 50 years. And we'll figure out the mechanics in 50 years. So they separated. So that way, we ain't even arguing about you going no more. 50 years from now, just be
You gonna be gone.
This is how you gonna leave. But for them, 50 years was no time. China as a solid entity is 3,000 years old. But if you take Iran, which is the core part of what was the Persian Empire, it's 3,000 years old. The United States is 250 years old
Right.
next year.
Next year.
Let me tell you how fragile all of this is, how stupid Americans sound when they talk about America. America has been the political superpower for 80 years, post-World War II, because it wasn't that prior to World War II. So it's 80 years between America saving the world and Donald Trump. And it's burning out. But guess what? For the Roman Empire, as the Americans think about it, there's only about 130 years between Augustus and Nero. So if you think about it, from the founding of the Roman Empire to Rome burning and being on the border of Nero, just 100 years. And the other 300 years of the Western Empire, all of that happened. Nero is the last Roman to be the emperor. I mean, that's called the last Italian. All the rest of them, Trajan, all the rest of them, they came from the provinces. They came from Spain. They came from France. They were generals and stuff. So literally, the world, if America wanted, and Americans like to think of themselves as the modern day Roman, then the Roman Empire survived because they believed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because damn near every emperor after the first 100 came from someplace else in the empire. Mm-hmm. They were not native to place it was founded. And the Western Empire was over at about 400 and something BC. So literally, Constantinople was in, and Constantine, the guy who wrote about. I think he was from someplace in Eastern Europe. So these folks, we talk about the Roman Empire, but they ain't white Italians. Oh, and where the Italians got pasta from, pasta comes from China. Right. Wait a minute. Paper comes from China. Okay. Europeans wrote on parchment and stuff, movable type. I mean, Gutenberg invented the European print press. The Chinese had print presses for 1,000 years before that. So that's all the stuff they brought with them when they came out. And so when they explored the world, they basically positioned, ain't shit here we want.
Right. We can go back to the crib.
Yeah, we can go back to the crib. But these are these are just basic facts. You ain't got to be no scholar fundamentally, but if you don't have that a larger understanding of the human experience, and if I was going to teach history, I've learned my perspective on it now is I wouldn't teach you the history of your country.
You know,
I would teach you the development of human civilization across all of these cultures,
which has a value for its own self. For its own self. Right. And it takes me back to that motivational movie, Dreamgirls, right, when Curtis told the lead character, "You know why I made you leave?" "No, why'd you make me leave?" "Because your voice has nothing. It's only what I put in you." And that's where we are. You can be used to be whatever this country wants you to be when you're an empty set. Let's turn our attention to more to the psychological warfare that's being waged on us. I ordered a book yesterday in your wheelhouse, Doc. It's called High Functioning Depression. And it chronicles, I haven't read a page of it yet, but I'm looking forward to it because it talks about how we often mistake burnout for depression. But in the synopsis, it states that it's not burnout if it follows you away from the office. And we talked about a lot of heavy issues today. We even had Mike Jones, who says he has unplugged from certain news media outlets. We've talked about the, before we got on air, how Kwame unplugged from things while he was on vacation for his mental health. As we venture this thing, Doc, what approaches should we be using for our own sanity and for our ability to put in and wage the fights that we need to in order to sustain us?
So this is another one of the spaces in which, again, we got to get out of these random spaces that, like, this mental health period is another space that we are in denial about. So we say stuff like, like this stuff that's going on now. Somewhere there's Negroes sitting around a table talking about, white folks is going crazy right now. We used to this. This is how this shit ain't healthy. And so we be acting like
This is not normal.
we act like we've gone through all of this stuff unscathed. And it's not.
And we got a handle on it.
Yes, it is not true. Like, whatever you can die of, we die of disproportionately high because we're not well, in the main. And so, in order to be able to deal with any kind of mental health issue, you first and foremost, there's no different than anything else. Whatever problem you got to solve, you got to first acknowledge that there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so we struggle with that conceptually.
So let me ask you this, Doc, along those lines. We'll come up with things like, I'm in a funk, I'm not myself. So for how long should we wait before we address those issues?
So the mental health space, is what happens in the United States is predicated on the medical model, and it's literally jacked up, right? And so, as soon as you don't feel good, you probably need
A doctor.
Yes, you need to start thinking about, why I don't feel good. And you want to try to orient to what is it that's causing me not to feel good. And if you can do something to alleviate that, that's adaptive, then you should do that.
What do you mean by adaptive?
So, getting drunk on Friday is not going to fix whatever the problem is, right? And so, and I know this is not a gender thing, but I just hear far too many brothers say to me, I don't need no clinician. I just go with one of my boys, and we can sit down, good bourbon, and everything will be all right. No, you go with one of your boys, y'all just gonna sit down and have some good bourbon. Tomorrow, your problem
is going to be there.
It's going to be there, and depending on how good your bourbon actually was, you may or may not have a headache. And so we have to fundamentally accept,
Or you can't just smoke a blunt.
You can't just smoke a blunt. You can't just have some good bourbon. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so what we do, we are like awesome in escapism.
Mm.
Right. And so somewhere between, backyard barbecues and church, we are Houdini. We are great escape artists.
We have to learn to be that way when we talk about what Mike is saying, everything that we had to endure before we got to this point. We had to learn how to.
Well, the thing with that is that that's how we got gospel music. That's how we got jazz. That's how we got, we were creative.
Right.
That's different than smoking a blunt.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
And so,
that's true. That's true.
And so what we used to do in response to this thing, literally, you know, those responses were literally predicated on improv. Right. We would improvise, create, and literally make something out of nothing. And now too many of us are doing other than that. And so first and foremost, you got to acknowledge that there is in fact a stressor. And then you got to figure out, is this, you know, can I manage the stressor? What do I have in my, you know, at my disposal that helps me to manage the stressor? And then if you find that this is beyond what you're able to do, then you got to start trying to figure out, is there somebody I can talk to?
Charles, this is my lay interpretation of why we seem to be more not in control. I won't say out of control, but not in control. It is, for me, one of the effects of the last 40, 50 years post-civil rights is we're not Black anymore. We've become Americans. And we picked up all of the habits, attitudes, this notion of the autonomous individual. Because there was a time when out of necessity, we were, that matter of fact, I would tell anybody to this day, I have no idea of myself that doesn't include Black people. I cannot imagine Mike Jones without Black people. I mean, for me, I don't exist absent us as a community. I'm prepared to say today that there are a whole bunch of Black people, especially when you consider what I said a couple of months ago, that 87% of us were born after 1965, that have no connectivity of their personal identity to their collective identity. And it impacts not only the psychological system, I would say something I was particular Brooks used to write in the Times. Got an interesting piece in the Atlantic about morality and some other thing. It's harder to break down. I would suggest in a lot of our stuff, because there are things you used to wouldn't do because of us. It didn't have anything to do with you. It had to do with us. It had the expression, well, we don't do that. Mm-hmm. And you felt compelled to honor that. Some of the worst of us felt compelled to honor that. I don't think we're that people anymore. And I know damn well Americans ain't that people. So if we have become this autonomous individual, like they are the autonomous individual who has no connection to anything or anybody that's bigger than himself as part or herself as part of her identity. You know, a lot of the issues you are trying to fix can't get fixed because it fundamentally takes, at some point, humans are social animals. And if you lose the connective tissue that kind of binds a people together, you just got a bunch of lost individuals that some of them may function well, some of them might. But for me, that's why thinking about the history and the evolution of the changes, that's why, for me, we got to try to understand that so we can accommodate and make adjustments this current, the reality that we're facing, because everything that we had or we produced was a function of that reality. So, like you said, the blues is a response to the black experience. That and that's why can't nobody else make it up but us. Now a lot of people can play it because they can imitate it, but they can't produce it because it's not their lived experience. And we now, and I'll even take that as an example. I'll just stay with that. There was a time that the blues was a part of your cultural collection, particularly as you got older. Not that you liked, unless you were musician, you didn't like the blues at 17, but you get to certain ages in life and you say, damn, that sounds good. Well, it always, no, it didn't change. You got older. It means something to you now, okay? But it was always there. You just had to grow into it. But that was all part of the things that bound us together. And I really think fundamentally, that's at the heart of our issue. And until we can figure out a way to get, now that's the mental health issue. Until you can figure out a way to reconnect the tissue.
How do you
reorient? How do we reorient?
Yeah, right.
Or in family card, they would call it unification.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we get that. Yeah, we gotta
that
have
is the fundamental
reunification.
drives. So like, so when you start to look at, so you talk about, burnout versus depression, right? So neither of those are optimal circumstances, but we gotta look at, like, how does a person get into that space? Now, many of us get into that space because of misorientation. Like we not working. There are those of us who aren't working so that we can support ourselves. We're working because we are very materially focused, right? And so we do all of these things trying to get, you know what I'm saying? And so, but again, in the world of creativity, because that ain't no new thing, in the world of creativity, we had an answer to that. Temptation said, don't let the Joneses get you down. Right, so that's, right.
Also, it's the larger culture.
Right.
You just came back from Spain.
Yeah.
Okay. We all been someplace. Here's what I can tell you. You could, at 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock, ain't nobody eating lunch at their office, at their desk. I mean, look, they stop.
It's called a siesta.
Yeah, wait a minute. And if you're in Italy, if you're in France, if you're in Spain, everybody get a month's vacation, and you got to take it. Okay, matter of fact, we ain't gonna be here. You can't be here. And the reason we have meals is because food is important. The fellowship that comes from sharing food, all that's part of the culture. He said, well, what about the business? He said, what about the business? It'll be there for what we're done. But when I say we become American, that's literally what I'm talking about. There was a Black aesthetic, a Black behavioral norm. There wasn't white. I don't know if that's true now. I mean, in a macro, at a macro level. So we're screwed up as they are. It just looks a little different because our idiomatic expression is different than theirs, but it comes from America is a really fucked up place. It's been a fucked up place for quite a while now.
From its inception.
Yeah, but and to fix us, you got to start with that premise.
And see, that's
at the
that's why
individual
my
level,
yeah.
you have to start thinking about it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
and so we don't think so. And then you reference this, Mike. It's like we got this individual. We lock, stock, and barrel in this individual. And so if something is going on,
That's the
we-
point I wanted to bring
we-
out. This
we-
rugged individualism
yes,
is not us.
We narrow that down to us.
Yeah.
But the thing is bigger. So for the person that's experiencing depression, for the person that's experiencing burnout, whatever, it's a larger dynamic at play that you have to acknowledge exists. And many of us, we're not, for whatever the reason, and the reasons are many, we're not acknowledging. And then we limit, even once we get to the point, so it's different. So certainly there's a difference between our acknowledgement and our awareness. So we certainly can be aware that some shit's going on, but we just gonna deny or minimize. And so, when we get into that space where after the problem has come into our awareness and we're not doing anything about it, that's adaptive, that's helping us to manage it or, to get rid of it, then it becomes that, that's where it becomes a problem. But it starts with, I have to acknowledge that, you know what, I used to sleep, 6 hours. Now I'm only getting 4 hours, and that 4 hours isn't interrupted sleep. We gotta acknowledge those guys. I'm not eating, or I'm eating more. Like these kind of little that seem to be little. They're just the regular things that go on in the day. This is how you know that there's something wrong. I can't focus on whatever it is that I'm doing. I got many things. I can't focus because I got all of these random thoughts. Like all of those are indications of, maybe burnout, maybe depression. But, like once you started talking about, mood and appetite and all that kind of stuff, you're probably not dealing with burnout. You're probably solidly in the depressed space. Burnout is more like what you're doing is draining and unfulfilling, right? But again, much of what we can end up doing is draining and unfulfilling because we didn't go into it for other,
for a purpose.
right.
We went in for the
We went into
For the
You did
commerce.
it for the money.
Yeah,
did it for the money.
So at a point, the money is not enough to keep you engaged, and so you end up burnt out.
And then the other thing is, let's be honest, depending on what your intellectual proclivities is, you could have a high boredom threshold or low boredom threshold. He said, I don't find this interesting no more. So the energy that it takes to do this, I don't want to do. I don't want to
expand it,
yeah.
which is fine.
Which is cool. What I'm
Right.
saying is that there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't find this interesting.
And once you do that, the answer is to find your way out of that.
Right.
The longer you stay, the more likely you're gonna end up.
You are going
burning out
to
or depressed.
Yes.
I'll make it more simple. Is if you're a musician, particularly a jazz musician, somebody said, well, you don't play so-and-so anymore. He said, because I'm tired of playing. Okay. I've played it enough. I don't want it. Now, when I'm on tour, I'll probably play it because
Y'all like it.
Y'all like it.
Y'all like it.
But I don't
I don't
particularly.
have to have that.
Yeah.
And so, so we, like you and it can be these things over anything like we find ourselves wedded to our work situation. We find ourselves wedded to bad relationships. So like in the relationship space, I have I've just come into contact with more than a few people whose stressor is their family, and I'll say, you don't have to talk to such and such. I do. But why? That's my mama, that's my aunt. Okay, well then you can put some rules around how you talk to your mama and your aunt. But that's my mama. That's my aunt. You just gotta be willing to not engage in the way that's stressful. You gotta figure that out. But that's how we too many of us think that we have to tolerate some of this stuff because whatever the because is, because. But usually it's because they found, so when we're talking in that relational space, but that's my mama, that's my that's my sister.
I think it's people have, and this can be writ large for everything for a lot of people, but that happens when you don't feel powerful in a place, where you don't feel agency. Because when you feel agency, stuff you don't want to be bothered with, you just ain't.
And that's usually how I pivot in those situations, because I try to find something somewhere, it definitely is going to be unrelated, to show them that they exercise agency.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so if you do that in this situation, why? It's a skill. It's a transferable skill. So why you can't do it in this situation?
Or you could say, and I'll qualify it like this. Somebody could, or you could say, you could do it in this situation, but you don't want to pay the price.
You don't want to pay the price.
So accept the fact that you could get out, but
this is what you
by
not acting, this is what you decided.
That's not right. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody paying you for that. I need you to transition me out of this without the harm.
Real talk.
But I mean, that is really is what it is.
But people have told
going to be pains
right,
getting out of that situation.
Right.
But we don't want to deal with that.
Want to do it. Right.
Well, you know what?
That's a big price to pay too. Especially when you're talking about family members.
Well, what in general, there's and I'll clean up the phrase a little bit. But I had a good friend who was older than me, and we worked together also, and he was there's something happened to him, and I was more mad about it than he was. And he's the dean of the students. I said, God, how come you don't do this? And he had about 18, 20 years on me. And he looked at me and he said, well, Michael, sometimes the effort you give ain't worth the effort you get. So, and I was about 26, 27 when he told me that. I saw him again 5, 6 years later. He was back in St. Louis. I'm over there now on the board of all of that stuff. Told him the story. I said, I'm now old enough to understand what you said. I heard you the first time, but I didn't understand. And part of, but that's managing stress and burnout too, because now you made a decision. You said, yeah, I could do something about it, but it don't bother me as bad as this would be if I did it, and I don't want to go. So at that point, you accommodate.
But even going through that process,
that's empowering. That's empowering.
That's when you do the value judgment there,
right,
as opposed to something being imposed on
right.
You are making a conscious decision. You understand it, and that is more powerful. But that story, that story that you just told, I shouldn't say that story, but that example you just shared with us, the community that it took to do that.
Right.
You got a young guy that has enough wisdom to be in community with mature guys, and the mature guy that gave you a solid answer that's blessing another generation.
Right.
I mean, that in itself is phenomenal. Well, listen, I want to thank Dr. Alexander for this brainchild. I'm not gonna do you like Miss Laura and take credit for your idea. But we're putting us all in the same room. This has been one of those things.
And sorry, y'all missed the pre-show.
Yeah, 'cause the pre-show would have won an Emmy.
We gotta ship you down to the little more.
Yeah. But we want
We
to
gotta
thank
come to
you.
Chicago.
We got options.
Yeah, and thank you all for attending. And we'll have a final word from each, and we'll close it out.
When we started.
Yes, sir.
So again, like most of this, it starts with awareness. Whether we're talking about what we started off in, like the political space, and we ended out, in the mental health space. It's all kind of the same thing. Because your politics are a function of who you are, and so first and foremost, you got to get properly oriented. You got to know who you are and why you are that. And then you make your decisions from that point. And so literally, in order to be right-minded, you got to level set.
Incredible. Dr. Jones.
And just to piggyback on top of that, whatever the question you're wrestling with, you got to be willing to look past the obvious and say it's either a level deeper or a level up. And so it's like when you learn to do fractions. And
did you learn to do first?
yes, everybody did. We all old enough to do. And you can't solve any arithmetic problem with fractions, whether it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, till you find the common denominator. And that's what all of this is about. So to solve this problem, I need to reduce it to the common denominator, and then I can figure out how to work.
And we will add a label to that. It's easy for him to say that because he's Mike Jones. You may not have his perfection, but do the best you can.
And once you figure it out, have the courage to do something about it. Have the courage to do something about it. Have the courage to take on the problem and strive for a solution.
Absolutely. Just want to add, I read a great book called "It's One Thing, It's All One Thing." It is mental health, diet, politics.
What was the Billy Crystal movie? And there was the city guys on the cowboy trip.
Oh yeah, City Slickers.
City Slickers.
Yeah.
And I think it was Jack Palance. And he and Billy Crystal were sitting on the cliff up at the top of the mountain.
Right.
And Billy Crystal was asking him, he was wrestling with something, and Jack Palance said, "Do you know one thing?" And he said, "Huh?" He said, "Do you know one thing?" And basically, it's almost a Buddhist kind of thing. If you understand one thing, you can understand everything, because fundamentally, it's all the same.
It's all
the same thing. So all you really got to do is know one thing, and you can figure out everything else.
That is for sure.
Transference.
Yeah, and I would just say I would tune to a biblical statement, and it is be of this place, but not in it. This has never served us well. It never will. So we navigate it transactionally, and when we can, but we got to get to the center of us and stay there. Thank you for tuning in to The Level Set. We want to thank everyone, and if it's God's will, we'll see you soon.